Well, let's move on to tonight's stories. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, says government is in the process of establishing an investor protection fund to secure deposits. The fund will also be used to compensate and cushion investors who lose their investments to collapsed or distressed licensed operators. The Bank of Ghana, SEC, and all licensed operators will be required to pool resources to feed the proposed fund. Head of Policy and Research at SEC, Emmanuel Ashon-Katai, revealed this at a public lecture in Kumasi on Ponzi schemes. Prince Apia has more in this report.
Speakers at the lecture emphasized both Ponzi and pyramid schemes are dangerous and fraudulent investment ventures. Incessant public outcry over locked-up capital of innocent depositors and investors have been characterized by demand for state intervention. Head of Policy and Research at the Securities and Exchange Commission, Emmanuel Ashon-Katai, says establishing an investor protection fund will address investor concerns.
We are an investor protection fund. In fact, we have it in many countries, so that if an investor loses his money from a licensed operator, we can go to the fund and use the fund to compensate that particular investor. The Securities and Exchange Commission is going to put some money into it. Bank of Ghana is going to put some money into it. The government is going to put a little money into it. Then all licensed operators are also going to put some money into it. And then any income we derive from the investor, like the fees, we're going to take a little bit of the fees and put it into it. So we are going to look at various sources of funds to create that fund for the protection of investors. Oh, this year we are submitting it to the Ministry of Finance, who will table it probably to Parliament to create a fund, legally speaking.
Mr. Ashon-Katai added that only ordinary investors will be protected under the Investor Protection Fund.
Investors are normally divided into two: ordinary investors and qualified investors. Qualified investors are those who have investment knowledge, like accountants, bankers, and also institutional investors, big institutions, the pension funds and the rest. They are qualified investors, and they don't need protection because they know what they are doing, they know what is risk and what is good return on the risk. But ordinary investors are those who don't have what it takes to protect themselves. They are the ones we are going to protect. Ordinary Ghanaian investors, I mean.
The public lecture was organized by the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana. Chief Executive Kwesi Agyeman explains continued financial education is critical to empower people from falling victim to investment fraud.
And as part of our mandate, we also seek to educate the public on events and activities that affect the society. And we felt Ponzi scheme is one of the things that has become very interesting in our society. And we felt we needed to bring the knowledge to the public. And that is the reason why and the motivator to organize the public lecture on Ponzi scheme.
Meanwhile, from Kumasi, the public lecture on Ponzi schemes will be extended to other parts of the region by the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana. Prince Apia reporting.
Well, meanwhile, the head of policy and research at the Securities and Exchange Commission, Emmanuel Ashon-Katai, says the commission is holding discussions with Gold Coast Fund Management as well as other struggling companies on potential solutions to help them pay back locked-up funds of frustrated customers.
Holding a series of engagements with the company to bring certain assets on board so that we can generate enough funds to pay their investors with them. What is happening is that they have a lot of investment locked up with microfinance companies and government contracts, as well as other places. So we are trying to see how best we can mobilize those resources so that investors can have their monies back.
How soon?
We are working on it. I can't really tell, but we are seriously working on it. And we are hearing a lot of complaints too. So any investor who is unable to redeem investment can report to SEC so that we can document and call the company to see how best those investments can be paid back.
Well, we're getting a reaction from the General Manager, External Affairs and Investor Relations of Gold Coast Fund Management, Benjamin Afre. He says liquidating the company's assets to pay locked-up funds is not an option on the plate. He's been sharing his thoughts with Marketplace host Emmanuel Abuajiri-Afe.
We are saying that there are assets that have been created as a result of the investment we've made. So what we are doing is to put it behind a certain program that we want to bring on board. And the idea is that, one, it would help us generate the needed liquidity so we can pay customers. Because as you know, it is not something that will be turned around within a matter of a short period of time. It will take a bit of time. But as long as we have investments, we need to make sure we can, one, protect the investments and work with the state that we can retain the needed liquidity and pay our customers as well.
Is liquidation an option on the plane?
It is not. Liquidation is not the option that we are discussing because there is actually no reason why we should liquidate. What we have done rather is that because there are investments, remember that the issue is that of liquidity, not that of assets. The fact that there are assets there, but we don't have the liquidity to pay as the demands are coming up. And so what we are saying is that let us put this asset behind, use it, or use it as a leverage to raise either new money or to convert what it is that we have now into something that will bring the liquidity needed to take care of our customers as well. And as you know, you may be aware that actually SEC is also engaging not just us, but other
distressed companies as well.
Exactly, in the country, to work with them, to work with the BOG as well, to see what kind of support, what kind of help they can give so that we can come out of this difficulty.
Well, let's unpack this for you. Joining me in the studio is Joy business researcher Philip Namfori to make sense of all that we're hearing tonight. Philip, let's start with SEC's announcement that the government is in the process of setting up an investor fund to protect depositors. So let's first start with how critical this is and how it's going to curtail the struggles we are seeing in the capital market right now.
Dara, thank you very much. I think it's critically important. If you look at what happened in the banking sector, the deposit protection scheme, some reprieve to customers when an institution goes bust. With the investment world, I would say it's good. But I would want to see a fund that's structured in a way where investors or it does not promote moral hazard in the sense that anybody can open up a firm, do something untoward.
Exactly the question I was going to ask you. Wasn't this sort of going to make investment companies relax knowing that there is an investor fund to cushion customers if they go bust?
Yeah, and exactly my sentiments. But it behoves on the regulator to ensure that it's structured in a way that doesn't promote the moral hazard, where you can go and do something and know that there's a fund where your investors or depositors can fall back on. I'll use investors in this instance, can fall back on. So it must be structured in a way that it does not promote this. If you look at the Bernie Madoff scandal, till date, they are still in court and people are still being paid back because you can argue that their judicial system works properly and faster as compared to ours. But nobody should be allowed to take a risk with people's funds and go scot-free. There should be some penalties and especially pecuniary measures to ensure that such people pay something together with what the fund has when it's created.
Well, Gold Coast Fund Management has been in the news, of course, because they are unable to pay depositors. Now we're hearing that they are in the talks with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Let's first start by educating our audience on the genesis of all of this, the root causes of the problems that Gold Coast Fund Management is experiencing at the moment.
Okay, Darryl, I'll make it a bit generic and focus on Gold Coast a bit. When you take people's funds, you invest them in a multiplicity of assets. Treasury bills, government bonds, corporate bonds, you can do equities, you can do a number of things. What you have to do is that as a fund manager, you have to have enough on you in terms of cash to meet the redemptions from people who don't want to be in the investment scheme or product any longer. Have some in relatively liquid assets like treasury bills so that you can easily go and redeem those, turn them into cash and come and pay people off. Don't skew or put a lot of proportion of your assets into things that will not easily bring you back funds, e.g. real estate. When you go and you put your funds in real estate, you have a problem. The same thing applies in the banking world. Banks shouldn't put assets into high fixed assets so that when there's a problem, people can have access to the deposits. Investment world, pretty the same thing, but you have a bigger horizon in terms of investments. So corporate bonds, etc. Make sure that there's a fine balance in what you are doing so that when people like you and I come for our funds, you never know when somebody needs the funds. We can have easy access.
So the situation with Gold Coast Fund Management was a case of wrong investment made?
In my opinion, I engaged the gentleman who was on Marketplace today, Mr. Afre, and he was talking about their structured finance product that the SEC asked all members in the market to discontinue. You know, there was this notice from the SEC about guaranteed returns. So what happens is that if you have placed people's funds into a certain asset that you cannot easily liquidate, then you have problems. And if word gets out that one person cannot access their funds, you can imagine people all around running to access their funds.
Well, speak about the word liquidate. We've been asking in our poll tonight whether or not Gold Coast Fund Management's assets should be liquidated. Of course, there was news in the morning of something of the sort of, and we've got Gold Coast saying that it is not on their plate in terms of discussions. Mm-hmm. And look at that, Philip, 95% agreed that the assets of Gold Coast should be liquidated. Of course, it tells of customer frustration as well, but that's a very wide gap between the yes and the no. And so a lot of people agree with that. But we've heard Benjamin Affair say that that is not going to happen at all. What other options do they have, really?
Okay, Darryl, for me, I would say, in my opinion, the options are limited because it depends on where they've put the funds in. If it's in assets that are not easily liquidated in terms of turning those assets into cash to give them back to these investors, then it's going to be a problem. But going forward, in the generic investment world, there's always that time where you must balance what you have in cash, what you have in easily redeemable and liquid assets, and what you have in assets that don't bear easily redeemable features. So it's up to them to balance it, but they must ensure that in the coming months, everybody is
what do you have to say about how SEC has handled all of this? Has it been tough enough?
I would say initially, if you follow some of the arguments, like for example, the CEO of DataBank, he was captured on a story on my Joy Online saying that he feels the SEC has been a bit relaxed in the way at that time they were implementing this guaranteed returns. But you know, these are investments, Darryl. If you go too hard, something happens, everything goes bust, and people lose. So that fair balance must be achieved.
All right, thank you very much, Philip Namfori, with that perspective. Of course, we're watching to see how things pan out, what will be the outcome of that discussion between the Securities and Exchange Commission and Gold Coast Fund Management. Thanks very much indeed, Philip. Now, let's move on. Full banking sector confidence should be realized before the end of this year. That's assurance coming from the Bank of Ghana's governor, Dr. Ernest Addison. Now, the first quarter data from the central bank shows that deposits, loan advances, and liquidity have witnessed some marginal improvement. The development is coming after 2 years of reforms, which initially impacted on the sector's confidence. But speaking to Joy Business on the sidelines of the IMF World Bank spring meetings, Dr. Ernest Addison said the new trend should help impact positively on cost of credit this year as well.
Responding to the policies that have been put into place, the banks are more robust, they are better capitalized. That, gives confidence to people to put deposits in the banks. I'm sure there are other non-bank financial institutions that will be losing some of these deposits, and hopefully by the time we finish with the exercise in that sector, you would also see much more stronger non-bank financial institutions. I'm talking about finance houses, savings and loans, rural banks, and microfinance institutions.
Are we giving ourselves any timeline in terms of period where maybe second quarter, third quarter, where these rates again will start reflecting the cost of credit going down and the confidence that we are seeing is going to be consolidated? Because I look at K1 numbers and I was surprised about the quick impact on the market with respect to what was done over the years.
Well, we're all very hopeful that the impact will be immediate and quick, but I think we need to give ourselves time. The numbers in terms of credit growth has picked up. As of the last MPC, we've seen credit to the private sector go up. We need to sustain that to the end of the year and see how all of that goes.
So maybe third quarter, maybe we will start feeling those impacts in terms of cost of credit as well?
Yes. Remember, the cost of credit is a result of many factors, including some of the developments that are currently ongoing in terms of the demand for credit, and the budgetary outturn, in terms of movements in exchange rates, and developments in inflation. These are all very dynamic factors, and hopefully, given the current trajectory that we have, we would continue to see a downward trend.
Well, away from the financial sector, 5 years after its passage, implementation of the Minerals Development Fund law is almost about to kick off. This because government has finally inaugurated a 9-member board to oversee establishment of the fund. It will, among others, ensure mining communities receive their due in terms of development. There's more in this report.
The Mineral Development Fund law is a special document to ensure mining companies cater for the developmental needs of communities affected by the operations. Under the law, a fund was expected to be established. Unfortunately, 5 years after its passage, the fund is yet to be instituted. The launch of a 9-member board last week and chaired by the Chief Executive of the Minerals Commission, Dr. Adai Entwi Boisiako, paved way for the establishment of a fund. The board, among other duties, will spearhead a rapid development program in mining communities across the country. Chief Executive of the Ghana Chamber of Mines, Suleimanu Kone, assured of effective implementation of a law to ensure mining communities benefit from the fund.
It's a major expectation that and it's one of the objectives of the law itself, to have the kind of development within the mining communities which we all aspire to. Our expectation is that on the back of the mining industry, we should see better development than we have seen. And the vehicle to do that, as far as the whole country is concerned, is the Mineral Development Fund Act, providing dedicated funding for socio-economic development within the community. That is, for us, the critical part of the law. And our expectation is that the board will be up and doing. We have a representative on the board.
He also spoke on plans by some firms to develop the road networks in mining communities, especially that of Takwa.
I know of Goldfields. I serve on their foundation, and I got information that they are contributing handsomely to ensure that this road is fixed. I know Iduaprim as well, and I think that Ghana Manganese would also chip in. But like I'm saying, you are looking for sustainable solutions to the road, nightmare, so to speak. The nature of the road is such a terrible state that we need to be thinking long term, how to ensure that the road will have a longer lifespan, and ensure that businesses within the enclave, even people who live within the enclave, can use these roads longer term. And it's always important that we identify alternative means of transportation, especially given the nature of the businesses within that community. And any day we would advocate and push for the Western Rail Line to be fixed.
Suleimanu Kone is, however, hopeful of drastic transformation in these mining communities in the coming years. Ebenezer Sabute's report for Joy Business.
Now, tech giant Google has established its first artificial intelligence AI lab in Africa. Based in Accra, the lab aims to provide innovative solutions to problems facing the continent. Take a look at this.
We announced that we would have a center here in Ghana, the Google AI Accra, and people have doubted if this center really exists, which is why we decided today to have this open day.
Because AI holds many promises, and there are many fields where we can make important differences, or where we can bring our expertise in addition to expertise brought by other scientists in other fields.
Collaborations like these are happening, where you finally have people with very different backgrounds in the same room and talking about how do we optimize at every step in order to deliver kind of more bang for your buck.
One of the questions is kind of how machine learning can be potentially used to look at things like natural disasters.
So generally speaking, there's, you gather satellite imagery, and enhanced computer vision algorithms can really help you identify those things on a much larger scale than you could have a human label.
In the past 20 years, machine learning has advanced so much since we've had much larger data sets.
So we've literally gone from not being able to really distinguish what is in an image just 7 years ago, with errors like as high as 26% on this task of classifying images, to literally surpassing human performance on this same task.
Other applications, I think, would have to, for example, searching for information. And today you can just pull up Siri and just ask that question and get an answer right away.
Assistants from other brands are also available.
Yes.
We are concerned about 3 pillars. One of them is access. Connectivity is a challenge in Africa, and data costs are really high.
Which means more than 2.3 billion people still can't connect affordably. And it costs more than what they earn on average on a daily basis.
So a lot of times we're figuring out, how do we make connectivity possible? How do we make it affordable so that people are able to connect when they want?
So we still don't have the right policies around affordability. And we've seen very little movement there. So there's a lot for our policymakers and governments to do, just in terms of creating that enabling environment that will allow the sector to grow.
Well, our goal is to advance the frontiers of this science, but also we expect to, through collaborations with different institutions, working on local challenges.
Well, Google's first AI lab based here in Accra, and artificial intelligence, AI, is the future of technology. Interesting to find out what it brings and what the disadvantages could be. It's a subject we would explore, of course, not tonight because our time is up on Business Live. Thanks for watching. My name is Darryl Kwao. There's more news on our website, joybusinessnews.com. Stay tuned.